Look, I just want to spend some time talking about a company called Agenta. Like Annabelle, I'm a cook, but I cook in a laboratory with chemicals and test tubes and things like that. And what I cook up is sold all over the world. I just want to talk a bit about how the company formed, the trials and tribulations that we've been through, then finish off by talking a little bit about research and what the relevance of research is to the company. Bit of background, Agenta is completely New Zealand owned. It's owned by myself, other management and one other business partner. The whole idea of Agenta was taking research and combining that with manufacturing. The whole investment thesis being you can invent your own revenue streams. And by having this invention step and this creative step, you can actually lock those revenue streams into your business. And in the same way that Annabelle was very protective about her IP, this is the way that we're heading as well. As the business becomes stronger, balance sheet gets better, we can actually afford to start owning this IP and licensing it out, rather than actually squandering it by selling it or giving it away in some cases. We specialise in animal health. Anybody here will testify the amount of money you spend on a single dose for a cat is probably 10 to 20 times what you'd spend on a single dose for a human being. So it's the margins are very high. The total size of the market is a lot less, but we occupy quite a specific niche in that market. We have a large manufacturing operation based here in South Auckland. We manufacture 4,000 kilos of product per annum. So this is pharmaceutical product. So just to put perspective around that, or context around that, that's a shipping container per day leaves our facility, and 80% of that goes offshore, and half what we make actually goes above the equator. We also have research centres. The research is headquartered in New Zealand. We have outposts in New Jersey and Kansas, and the purpose behind these outposts are for them to act as a conduit for business. So we bought a subsidiary in New Jersey a few years ago, and we found that it was very successful having a US footprint, because the Americans are relatively parochial. When negotiating one contract, I wanted it done under New Zealand law, and they looked up at me and said, "I didn't realise you had law in New Zealand." So I think it was making fun of me, but basically there is an attitude that if it's not made here, then it's a little bit suspicious. And also I can understand the fact that flying down to New Zealand to slap Doug around because something isn't going well isn't a viable prospect, but driving down the road to New Jersey is. So having that US address was quite key. So we purchased a clinical CRO in New Jersey, and we've set up chemistry research in Kansas. And Kansas, for those who don't know, is the centre of animal health in the United States. It's the centre of animal health manufacturing, but there are very, very few R&D companies are there. I think we're the only one that's focused on animal health. We have 220 staff now. About 35 of those are in the US, and the remainder are based here in Auckland. The growth rate since we started is pretty good. Bit of a dip in the GFC, which I'll talk a bit about later. The dip happened at a very inopportune time. But the vision of the business is to be quite global in reach. The vision is to be quite insightful, to really understand what the customers want. We're a very customer-focused business, and also to meet those needs through true innovation and true research. And then at the end of it, manufacture those products that we invent. This is a map of the world that always interests me when I present this in the United States, because they've got no idea where this place is, because America is not in the middle. But the purpose of this is really to show, but on a map there's a long distance between us and our clients. In fact, almost all of them are actually above the equator. When I started my small research company, that was of no moment whatsoever, because we just email data. The only product you have out of research is data, and that can be transferred electronically. But when you start manufacturing large volumes of product, that creates a few issues. And having manufacturing contracts locked in by virtue of IP and ability to do research is quite key. The other thing here of note is that some of these companies have market capitalizations of, say, $250 billion. So if you annoy them, or even if they think you've annoyed them, they will sit on you until you stop breathing and give in. So we need, so in the same way that Annabelle was quite cautious about getting good legal support, we go down the same path. We don't really want to be sat on by Pfizer. This timeline here, I'm not going to go into a great level of detail. The salient points really are, we started off a decade ago with a staff of 2 and revenue of 12,000. We're quite proud of that. And as it grew and grew and grew, the staff numbers grew and grew as well. The key point being in 2006, based on the sort of growth that we'd experienced between the inception of my small research business in 2006, that inflection back in those days was adequate to go out and raise a whole ton of money to buy a large manufacturing asset, which is what we did when we formed Argenta. One of the key things with that much debt and the manufacturing asset that we had was volume. The amount of product you can produce is critical. So we needed to get into the United States, and you can only do that if you go through one of these things, which is probably one of the most hair-raising, if I had any, hair-raising events in my career. This allowed us to really start selling product into the United States in a very significant way, and also released a whole lot of other markets around the world. At this point here, this is when we purchased our US subsidiary. 3 weeks later, Lehman Brothers fell over, and the whole world went to hell in a handbasket. The GFC hit, and that sort of, with a sequential agglomeration of debt, that wasn't the best moment. But since then, we've been able to come out of it quite well. With the latest thing, we've actually opened a lab in Kansas and registered some good IP into Europe. So basically, in a nutshell, the business is all about research feeding manufacturing. The research being a turnkey provision of services. It'll be the chemistry invention of a product, what actually goes into it. It'll be the clinical assessment of that. And then it'll be also developing IP sponsored by ourselves for subsequent licensing to our clients. All of this leads into a growth in manufacturing. So I just want to go through a little bit, just very briefly over the financials. As mentioned, the growth rate was pretty strong. This dip here, albeit not huge, it was on the back of a lot of debt raising, so it wasn't the best time for it to occur. But R&D is Argenta's growth engine. Half what we make we've invented, which is really key. So revenues about 60 to 70 million. Key factor being export is 80%. So I want to talk a bit about how not to prepare for an environment. How not to prepare for a financial crisis. We're going to write a book on this, I think. But when we first started the business, my background, I'm a PhD chemistry. I'm all about growth, all about, I got my first chemistry set when I was 8, and really been into basically creating things out of chemicals in the same way I guess Annabelle creates things out of food, and I really, really enjoy it. I get a real passion for it, but I was just amazed how I could translate that into revenues, and it was quite exciting to me. So, to the exclusion of all else, I was all about growth. So I was out there getting business, and revenues went really well. We had a great time. In 2006, we managed to borrow $41 million as part of a debt equity mix to actually acquire the very large manufacturing asset that I'd actually worked at when I had my first job in the industry, and that was on the back of revenues of 18. 2007, we bought down shares, and it's another $5 million. That was also debt serviced, revenues of 23. In 2008, revenues shot up again, quite substantially, to 30. And we thought, well, this is going very well, let's borrow some more money. So we bought our subsidiary in the United States. And of course, 2009 hit, and that was the end of the honeymoon period. So basically, the US operations didn't fire. It actually lost $1 million. So we had to dip further into what reserve shareholders had to actually pay that off. But added major costs because the US research people, they're very expensive. A whole lot of veterinarians and wandering around measuring stuff, and it's very, very expensive. So with revenues dropped, but expenses went up. That combined with the GFC was not good. We weren't too sharp on foreign exchange at that point in time. We didn't have a very effective forex policy. Really, growth outstripped systems, and this really there was no focus on efficiency. The good thing is that we had actually been able to muster very large revenues. It's all very well to be efficient, but you have to have revenue to be efficient. So at least that was on our side. But all of this together added to a bit of a problem. The executive team and the board were quite unaware of what was going on around us, and looking back on it, you wonder how you possibly could be. It's because all the graphs are pointing in the right direction. What could possibly go wrong? Everything went wrong was the answer to that. So basically, as a management team, executive, and the board, we're somewhat ill-equipped to handle this. We're breaking covenants, and in previous months when that had happened, there'd been a bit of a come to Jesus speech with the bank, and they would give you a note, and it's okay, But of course, when this happened in 2009, all the smiley faces disappeared, and a whole lot of grumpy faces came around the table. And it was a very, very different experience. And I can understand why they were very grumpy, because they had lent us a ton of money and they wanted it back as soon as possible. So we had issues with gearing, mainly because everything was largely debt funded. Debt to earnings was in double digits, which is no place anybody wants to be. So the fix, somewhat unsurprisingly, there was a difference of opinion as to what the fix would be. My view was, we'll just get efficient. We've got all this revenue, let's just hone things down, we'll be fine, don't worry about it. The bank said, no way, just raise money, and raise money now. So, given the circumstances, my opinion didn't really carry much weight. The opinion of the bank sort of weighed much more than the opinion of Doug Cleverly at the time. So, so capital raising was mandated, and it was mandated to happen immediately. Worst possible time, as all of you all know, I didn't at the time, but now I certainly do. When your business is under duress, you have a mandate to raise capital. That gets around. It's a fire sale situation, and your equity is worth diddly squat. Good news is there's a lot of agreement about the initial steps. The initial steps were we needed some time to prepare an information memorandum and a data pack and so forth. So let's just try and make that take as long as possible, whilst we overhaul the executive, overhaul the board. And what we did is we set really tiny little targets for the bank. We made commitments to the bank of, look, we'll make this month, and it may be a tiny amount more than last month. But you set targets that you can guarantee that you can meet. And by doing that, the bank confidence grew and grew and grew and grew, which gives them sort of a sense that when the company says they're going to do something, they in fact will. So I think the greatest asset, we owe too much money, which is not a recommendation to anyone, but by owing too much money, there was no chance of us being shut down, because I think the recovery costs would have actually come to about 1/2 of the debt. So the solution, it was really critical to get the bank to believe in us, and we identified a very high positioned person in the bank to bring out and show them around the plant. And one thing about our facility is when you get somebody into the plant, the grumpiness sort of melts away and the smiles start, because they start to understand what the business proposition is all about. There are scientists running around doing really interesting stuff. There's people manufacturing things. There's product going out the door at 20 tonne a day. It's just a lot going on. It's very, very exciting. And we were able to sort of convince this very high person in the bank that we were a prospect worth backing. So whilst we're still on the bad bank pile, we weren't going to go into the bin at this point in time. So we sort of staved off execution. We also were entertained very close communications with the bank as well. We fronted up every month and just face to face and just explained what was going on, told them that yes, we had actually met that target, and here's our new target, and gave them confidence. And what happened here, through doing all of this, the mandate remained that we had to raise money, but the mandate became relaxed. The 6 months became 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. And this 18-month period gave us time to hone the operations down. We got experts in to look at our supply chain and drive some efficiencies into that. And with the revenues that we had amassed, we actually were able to start converting a lot more of that into profit. So this time was used to transform the business. At the end of it, there was no mandate to raise money at all. We didn't have to raise money, so we went out and raised money because with all this honing and increase in profitability and the business starting to pick up, we ran out of capacity in terms of space, people and so forth, and I'd run out of money long ago to actually fund that. There was an aftermath, of course, to all of this. The entire board was replaced and new board members appointed. There was an entirely new executive team in place as well, with one exception. This came at a high personal cost because obviously, we started the business as a close-knit team, and one of the team members that is no longer with the company was probably one of my best friends, and you can imagine how painful and horrific that is to go through that. Whilst there's a right thing to do, but that doesn't necessarily make it the easy thing to do. Survivors, though, there are winners that come out of this. Obviously, the shareholders, 170 families, plus also the supply companies. Now we have a little economic ecosystem surrounding the business now. We have we should buy 1,200 different items or bits and pieces that we assemble into products, and these are all made largely locally, but also from overseas. So that little ecosystem was preserved, and the bank obviously did well out of it, and deservedly so for their support, I believe. So this whole new approach, the GFC was probably a good one in some respects for us. It did drive efficiency into the business. It was just lucky that we had gone about getting volume and decent sized revenues, because without that, you can't become efficient making nothing. Our board changed dramatically. I'd met with certain individuals to understand how do you reconfigure a board, and got some very good advice on that. And so the board now is excellent. It's very much into governance and doesn't sort of eyes in, hands out type thing. Very lean operation. And basically we can now contemplate expanding our site. We're looking at a 35% increase in footprint in South Auckland, and we're currently in due diligence in a manufacturing operation in the United States. Plus we have a new business partner, and also I've fired myself for incompetence and appointed a new CEO. So basically it's liberated me to go out and get some more revenue now, which is really cool. That's what I'm quite good at. Dealing with personal grievances, most of them against me. It's not my cup of tea at all. So basically a bit of appreciation. I'm going to express my appreciation to the bank for their support and also their stamina. Great directions from governance from the board, but that's all very good. But there's been a lot of heroics in the Argenta team, a lot of time and effort spent by the company that also all at once is humbling and also makes you very proud. Go on to a bit more of a positive subject, the relevance of R&D. R&D benefit to the company. R&D is what we're about, essentially. We invent things that we can then make. That locks those revenues into your business. So all of the growth that we've seen is due to R&D. I'll show you a graph in a minute about that. But the good news is the research is revenue generating itself. We don't do research for 5 years on a wish and a prayer. We de-risk research by getting remunerated for doing it. One of the big things though about this company or country is that number 8 wire, all the places I've been and companies I've visited, there are Kiwis in very high positions in a lot of our client companies, and it's their resourcefulness and their lateral thinking that seems to be universally appreciated by big companies overseas. So this number 8 wire is awesome. The she'll be right is death. I mean, if any notion of she'll be right, you're out the, they'll kick you out the door faster. Then you can say she'll be right. So basically, Argenta is all about high quality and high-end research, followed up by manufacturing. This graph is an interesting one. This graph just shows the revenues coming out of manufacturing from different areas of the business. So this blue line along the bottom here, for instance, that's just like Annabelle gives me a recipe, and then I make it under contract to Annabelle. So that's just a bog standard contract manufacturing relationship. So basically you can see there it's pretty flat. There's no great growth there, any change. All of the growth in the business has come from these 2 lighter shades. And these 2 lighter shades, when total, represent the products that are made by us, that were invented by us. So you can see how the whole R&D side of things is the sole reason for growth in the business. And the green line just shows that the gradual increase in the dollars earned for manufacturing products that we've invented, and now we're up around sort of 55%. It's going to be 75-80 before not too long. Also, the research to revenue thing, I just want to just give a quick slide on this and just how you can actually de-risk your R&D. These are a number of products down here with roundabout fees that we charge for developing those products. So there's 6 quite important products here that didn't exist 5 years ago. They now do. Those products in total are earning about $30 million in revenue for the business. And of that, 24 million is export. So basically the whole export side of things for us is absolutely critical. This is the do nothing proposition. So basically this growth here, and I hate hockey sticks. I've prepared so many hockey sticks I'm embarrassed to tell you. But the bottom line is this here is if we do nothing further. So this revenue gain is based on client forecasts. This is what's going to happen if you just continue doing nothing and don't innovate and don't actually do research. That's what the prospects look like. When you're faced with that, you need to spend a heck of a lot of money on expansion and also secondary manufacturing facilities. As I mentioned, increasing the footprint in Auckland by 35%, looking to increase manufacturing by 12%. We're doubling our R&D in Kansas by 100% this year, increasing headcount on site in Auckland by 15%, and so we're in due diligence with respect to a US facility. And that's me. Thank you.